If Iran's protests grow from street demonstrations into a real challenge to the state, the deciding force is rarely the regular army. The decisive force is the parallel security system built to protect the Islamic Republic itself, led by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, backed by its intelligence arms and the besieged militia, and tied into a political economy that gives it both coercive power and money. Iran's constitution basically codifies this split. It assigns the regular army, the Artesh, responsibility for guarding Iran's independence and territorial integrity. In a separate provision, it defines the IRGC as an institution meant to guard the revolution and its achievements. Those are not subtle differences in wording. They describe two missions that pull in different directions during domestic unrest: national defense versus regime defense. That division also shapes who answers to whom. The IRGC reports directly to the supreme leader and has become one of the most powerful organizations in all of Iran, originally created after the 1979 revolution to defend the new system. Over that time, it's evolved into its own force with its own ground, naval, and aerospace branches, plus an external operations arm, the Quds Force, and command influence over internal security networks. The Artesh, however, exists to defend the country. The IRGC exists to defend the system that rules the country. That distinction is why you can have periods where the state looks confident militarily while still feeling politically brittle. The practical result is two militaries, two missions. The Artesh is structured like a conventional arms force. Its cultural is more professional, more hierarchical, and historically more cautious about overt political involvement. Analysts have long described it as an institution that emphasizes national defense and tends to frame its role as apolitical compared with the IRGC's revolutionary identity. The IRGC is structured like a hybrid: part military, part ideological guardian, and part internal security backbone, part foreign proxy manager. A recent explainer from the Critical Threats Project described the IRGC as the primary actor for Iran's missile and drone arsenal, and for managing and supporting the so-called axis of resistance, with four services mirroring the Artesh and additional branches including the Basij and an intelligence organization. That explains a puzzle many viewers have whenever they watch footage from Iran during unrest. They see riot police, plainclothes units, besieged motorcycles, intelligence arrests, and then they hear about the military as if this is one single actor. It is not. Iran's internal coercion typically runs through a stack of organizations with different legal authorities and different incentives, but designed to mesh during crises. Let's start with the Basij. The Basij is a mass organization that can act as a neighborhood-level surveillance and mobilization network, and it can surge manpower quickly. Its size is hard to verify because membership is opaque and definitions vary, but U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency reporting provides a rough sense of scale by listing a large Basij reserve component. In its public Iran military power report, the DIA lists Basij reservists at around 450,000, and it shows how the IRGC structure sits alongside the Artesh and other internal security components. Even if you treat those as approximate, the implication is what matters. Iran has a large paramilitary mobilization tool that is designed for domestic control, not conventional warfighting. Then layer in the IRGC's own intelligence and security arms and the broader law enforcement machinery. When the regime feels threatened, it uses overlapping authorities: arrest and intimidation, surveillance and information control, rapid deployments, and visible street presence. Reuters described Iran intensifying internal crackdowns after a short war with Israel, including heavy deployments, checkpoints, and mass arrests, particularly in Kurdish regions, driven by fears of unrest and infiltration. Around the same time period, the Financial Times reported on besieged paramilitary activity in the context of hunting alleged Israeli agents, with volunteer patrols and checkpoints expanding the state's domestic reach. Those reports are not just about one moment. They reveal the regime's muscle memory. When it senses danger, it leans in on a layered internal security ecosystem anchored by the IRGC and the Basij. The Quds Force is the external mirror image of that logic. It exists to extend Iran's influence abroad through unconventional warfare, covert activity, and support to partners in militias. The U.S. National Counterterrorism Center describes the IRGC-QF as a primary organization for covert lethal activities outside of Iran, including asymmetric operations. West Point's CTC has likewise described the Quds Force mission in terms of defending the revolution and building armed militias aligned with Iran's regional regional strategy. For domestic politics, this matters because the same institution that manages foreign networks also gains prestige, budget leverage, and a narrative of being the vanguard against external enemies. That makes it harder for civilian politicians to constrain it during internal crises, especially when the regime frames protests as foreign influence. So why does the IRGC, not the Artesh, sit at the center of regime survival? Because it controls the tools that matter most in moments of internal instability: rapid domestic mobilization, intelligence penetration, narrative enforcement, and the coercive capacity to deter defections. It also controls major strategic capabilities like missiles and drones, giving it leverage in external crises that feed back into domestic legitimacy through rally around the flag dynamics. The other reason is money. The IRGC is not just a military actor. It's tied into a broad web of economic interests, from construction and infrastructure to sanctioned aero logistics and procurement. Reuters has described the IRGC as overseeing a vast business empire that spans major sectors and gives it financial clout inside of Iran. In October 2025, Klingendale published a detailed analysis of how an expansive military boneyard complex rose in Iran, including how interpretations of constitutional provisions helped justify the entry of security-linked institutions into post-war reconstruction, feeding the growth of the IRGC's engineering arm, Khatam al-Anbiya Construction Headquarters. You do not need to believe any single estimate of how much of the economy this touches on to understand the political outcome. When a security institution has major economic stakes, it has more patronage to distribute, more allies to cultivate, and more reasons to resist reforms that could weaken its position. This is where protests intersect with succession risks. Sustained unrest changes elite calculations in two directions at once. It can push factions to close ranks and empower the security state because disorder becomes an overriding fear. It can also raise the temperature inside the elite because every crisis creates blame, reshuffles command appointments, and forces hard choices about how much violence to use and how much legitimacy to spend. Reuters reporting in June of 2025 described the Supreme Leader's inner circle being hollowed out by Israeli airstrikes that killed several senior IRGC figures, highlighting both the centrality of the guards and the vulnerability created when key leaders are removed. In a system where personal networks and institutional loyalty matter, sudden losses and rapid promotions can create friction, paranoia, and overcorrection, especially if protests flare at the same time. So what should you watch in the next crisis to understand whether the security apparatus is holding or straining? First, watch tasking. If you start seeing the Artesh used more visibly for internal security, that is often a sign that the regime wants to broaden the burden beyond the IRGC and police, or a sign that it feels stretched. Second, watch the besieged footprint. More checkpoints, patrols, and local mobilization often indicate a shift to mass surveillance and deterrence rather than precision policing. Third, watch internal discipline signals. Sudden command changes, public corruption cases, or factional media attacks that hint at elite infighting inside the security ecosystem. Fourth, watch the regime's narrative choices. When authoritarians lean heavily on foreign agent framing, it often signals fear that protests are becoming broadly legitimate in the public mind, which pushes them towards securitization. The bottom line is that Iran's real military power in political terms is the machine designed to manage internal threats and wage asymmetric conflict. That machine is the IRGC-centered security state. It is why protests can be met with rapid, coordinated repression, and it is also why any succession period is inherently risky. The same institution that keeps the system stable is also a power center with its own interests. And in a moment of mass unrest, the question becomes less about whether Iran can defend its borders and more about whether the security apparatus stays cohesive enough to defend the regime's center. While Iran's military is designed to suppress dissent, their economy is the exact reason why it keeps having dissent in the first place. See why that is in this next video. Like this video if you found it helpful or informative. It also really helps this video and channel reach new audiences, and I really appreciate it. See you in the next video.